Hello and welcome to the Band of One podcast. I am Riley Wilson, and this podcast is designed for anybody who wants to start, maintain, or grow a solo or small group performing career. I have over 50 years of live performance experience. We'll share not only what I've learned, but tips from other hardworking pros in their neck of the woods. The idea here is to make this actionable, profitable, and fun. If you like what we do, subscribe and be sure and share the podcast. Let's get underway. Once again, my guest today is the talented Bill Barney. Bill, welcome again.
Thank you, Riley. Good to be here.
Good. So let's pick up, as I said, that you're now in Raleigh. You've left the corporate world behind. You've got a restaurant gig. And it looks like you're interested in playing more than one day a week. How do you make that a reality?
Well, it was a little bit of a process, but I learned about several marketing websites, if you will. I was never one for using a booking agent. I just kind of felt that it just wasn't my style. I would rather kind of hustle on my own. So I started using sites like Gig Salad. It used to be Gig Masters. Now it's called the Bash
Yes.
and Thumbtack, which kind of throws some people because Thumbtack is not primarily for musicians, but honestly I found it's been very productive for me.
Has it worked well? Good. I want to circle back about that because I've talked at length actually about all three sites. I didn't have a lot of luck with Thumbtack. My buddy David Payton, who's in Atlanta, very successful solo performer, had not had any luck with it at all, but I'm glad to hear that it's worked for you. Of those, what would you say? What's the number one? Can you kind of rank them in order of how much you get work from each site?
Yeah, I would say the Bash, Thumbtack, and Gig Salad.
Interesting. Interesting. I'm glad to hear that Thumbtack works for you. Can you want to kind of talk about how you approach that? Because Thumbtack is a pay per lead thing, and I booked a few jobs on it. But I just was curious what your experience has been and how the mechanics and all that work for you.
Well, it's as you know because you've used it before. It's hard to qualify your listing to people that are just looking for musicians. I mean, I've gotten people that I've sometimes leads for mariachi singers and stuff like that because they don't take the time to maybe delve into the site a little more. Also, as far as restricting a minimum performance time, I've gotten people asking me to work for 30 minutes, and that just isn't going to work. But I will tell you that in general, my experience is after just about the time I've gotten two or three leads at 10, 15, $20 a lead, I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing here? And then I get a gig for $300, and I keep pretty good records as far as output and input for each of the marketing things that I do, and far and away the Bash. I mean, excuse me, Thumbtack, well, in a way, pays more than pays for itself.
That's really good. I'm glad to hear that because I, as I said, have used it in times past. It hasn't been that good. I've noticed for myself that Gig Masters, or the Bash as we now call it, I've been with them for over a decade, well over a decade. I generally get better paying jobs there. Gig
Yes.
salad is also good, but one of the issues that we get a lot of recently is I get a lot of bottom feeder jobs, and then gig salad is not inexpensive. And I took them to task in a recent podcast about that because they cost actually a little bit more than the Bash does per lead, and then you also have to pay a hefty sum up front. So I'm glad to hear that for those folks that maybe are just starting out, that Thumbtack may be a viable alternative. In the last year, how many jobs would you say you booked with Thumbtack? Just
Boy, I would say at least 25 or 30, maybe more.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's okay. Well, Riley has to go back to the drawing board. That's the great thing about this. As I said earlier, I'm going to include not only my tips, but other folks. I'm really delighted to hear that Thumbtack has worked for you. Um, you mentioned also a website. You want to
Yes.
talk to me about that?
Sure, I'd like to think that the website is part of the reason why Thumbtack is has been as productive as it has been. Hopefully, some people that go to Thumbtack will go to the website and kind of check it out a little more detail. Or if my response to them is, if you haven't already, please visit BillBarney.com. I use Bandzoogle as the website provider because I'm computer friendly, but I'm not tech savvy, if you will. So I'm not into writing code and doing stuff like that. So it was very simple for me to do. And they have a great deal of options as far as website design and pretty flexible and reasonable cost. And I've used them for probably uh, 6 or 7 years, maybe.
You know, one of the things that I think we probably would caution people coming into our business, there's literally a dozen or more rabbit holes that we can all get sucked down into.
Oh
And
yeah.
probably designing a web page is one of those that I think if you can avoid it or get some help or something like that, that it's beneficial. For example, I've used a program called Rapid Weaver on my Mac because I'm also a guitar teacher and a voice talent. And I got a voiceovers page, which is wrileywilson.com. And then the guitar page, which is not only guitar teaching, selling guitar books, but playing live, that's Guitar Made Simpler. And I had to have something that I could tweak both of them reasonably quickly, again, without, as you said, spending hours on coding and things like that, of which I have no aptitude and less desire.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear that you said this is Bandzoogle. Is that
Yeah, Ben Zoogle. And as a matter of fact, they have, I want to say they have an arrangement with Gig Salad, I think. It's either Gig Salad or the bad, probably Gig Salad. You do one, you get a discount on the other at like 15, 20%. So there's some value there.
that's a good thing. So let me ask another question. Occasionally, I'll get that from my web page here. Do you get people that just contact you off the web page, or just email you from the web page?
I do. Matter of fact, I booked a gig today. A senior, a senior center. They just happened to go to my website. I guess I'm not sure what prompted that, but they hit the contact me button and wrote a little note to me, and I contacted them right away and booked the gig. So it's pretty simple.
That's terrific. I want to talk brass tacks about money for just a moment because you mentioned something earlier I'm in 1,000% agreement with. I'm not going to go somewhere for 30 minutes. I've gotten several, in fact, in the last 30 days, I've got several opportunities to play a retirement facility for 30 minutes
Hmm.
in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is a 4 hour drive for me, as you well know. And there's no way I'm ever going to do that. Even Fort Worth is an hour each way from Frisco, where I am. So I'm unable to play a job for 50 bucks or even 300 bucks for 4 hours in Fort Worth. It's just not cost effective.
No, it's
So
not.
how do you measure that? How many of your jobs, and again, I lived in Raleigh off and on a couple of times. Raleigh is about 30 minutes from Durham and about 35 minutes from Chapel Hill. So how much of your work is just Raleigh centric or Raleigh, Cary, North Raleigh, like Wake Forest, and how much of it are you actually going to Durham or Chapel Hill or surrounding communities?
So there's kind of three different divisions of work that I do. One is there are three venues that I play regularly, yeah, every other week, and I kind of bounce back and forth, and once a month in another. Um, and those are all in North Raleigh, Wake Forest.
Okay.
And I'm so fortunate because they're all within 15 minutes of my house. I'm not playing any later than 9 p.m. in any of them. I mean, I mean, how many people would like to have that play out, right?
Yeah.
It's a very incredible opportunity. So there's that segment, and cultivating relationships for those. The second segment might be senior centers, like the one you just mentioned. And I'm fortunate in that there are a number of senior centers in and around the Raleigh area. Probably the furthest I've traveled for a senior center was for a New Year's Eve gig. Actually, I played an hour and a half in Southern Pines, or I drove an hour and a half to go to Southern Pines to play
Yep.
for 2 hours. But I charged them a little more than normal because obviously it was New Year's Eve and the travel, and they were fine with it. It worked out pretty good. I do a lot of my work. I have a female vocalist that joins me, and it's a real treat because she's fabulous, and she's a vocal teacher as well. And she really she inadvertently she's really made me step up my game. So it's a good experience.
That's wonderful. So let's talk about that because you're the first guy that I have spoken to that not only has a solo act but a working duo. And I'd
Mhm.
like to know kind of how that began and how that's changed and how much of the work is strictly solo stuff and how much of the work are duo things.
Well, I previously I worked with a couple of other female vocalists from time to time, and Um, Not that I'm a perfectionist, but neither one of them wanted to put in the time and effort and work to get to a performance level that I wanted, or try some of the more challenging songs that I wanted to do. And I ran into this lady. We were in a restaurant, and I was sitting adjacent to her. I was with some friends. She was with some friends. I overheard her mention that she was of Hungarian descent, as am I. And I grew up having Hungarian food. I thought, well, if I introduce myself to this lady, I'm not looking to hit on her, but maybe I'll get some good Hungarian food out of the deal. And one thing led to another. We became friends. I had no idea that she was a vocalist, much less a fabulous vocalist. And I happened to see she had posted something on Facebook one day. I thought, holy cow. So I called her up. So I had no idea. So we started talking. One thing led to another. I thought, well, let's try a couple of gigs and see how it goes. We got a minimal repertoire that could work between us, and the feedback we got was very positive. Our voices blend together very well. We're very intuitive to each other. So when one of us makes a mistake, the other covers up. I mean, it's it's interesting, particularly because both of us can sing melody or harmony, and so if one of us goes to harmony and we're supposed to be doing the melody, the other one or melody, the other one picks it up. So it's we have a great working relationship and really enjoy that, and so I because of the success and the feedback and the fact that it's fun to work with somebody who's really good at what they do. It just became more and more. Then she sings with me two of the three regular gigs that I do.
Interesting, interesting. So how many, what would you say, 40% of your shows are with the duo and the other 60% solo, or is it higher tip solo or what?
Probably, maybe even closer to 50-50 because of the regularity, because the
Wow.
one-offs will, obviously, they kind of come and go. Not much regularity to that, but those one-offs that come from the marketing websites or directly from my website that's the kind of the third segment, if you will.
One of the things I noticed, I was looking at your performance calendar the other day, and it looks like you do a lot of Sundays and Thursdays at the restaurants. Is that right? Or
Yeah,
something
that's
like that?
correct. I play 3 out of 4 Sundays at one restaurant. I was playing all four, but I ran into a fabulous entertainer friend, and she wanted to play out, and I said, why don't you take one of my Sundays, and so that worked out pretty well. And then I bounced back every other Wednesday, every other Thursday between two other restaurants.
Wow. Okay. And then when you get an opportunity to do like a New Year's Eve gig that's an out of town gig, or maybe somebody's got a private party or something like that, that you would get a lead from, say, from the Bash or Thumbtack or Gig Salad. When do those fall? Are those normally on weekend nights?
You know, it's interesting. I would have thought that would be true, and I work honestly very few weekends. Most of my gigs are during the week. They're not the higher paying, $500-$600 gigs. They're 200 or 300, and they're also conveniently located, and they're what would be professionally called casuals,
Yes.
and so it just seems to work out that way, and that leaves me the weekends free much of the time.
So, question on these $200 to $300 jobs, are these mostly what, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours? How does that work?
Usually 3 hours. Sometimes
Yeah.
they're 4 hours, and I'll knock the price up a little bit accordingly, depending upon how far the travel is. And of course, if it's for a senior center, as you know from your experience, you generally charge less because their budget is limited and
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So here's a question. If you're doing all of these gigs, what gear are you lugging? How much of that do you have to carry? Any places have their own sound systems where that's not necessary? What do you do in terms of gear for the shows?
So I've got two sets of gear. First of all, I'm a big Bose fan.
Okay.
So I have an L1 Pro 16, which was upgraded to L1 Model 2 prior to that, but that's the column array system that many people are familiar with. I use that for my medium to larger gigs, and I've found that I'm able to do maybe up to 300 people with that, which is surprising, depending upon the room and acoustics, of
Sure.
course. but I also have two Bose S1 Pros that are smaller speakers. They're both of them they're battery operated. And for a senior center, I'll just use one of those because it's more than enough to cover, and it's less stuff to cart around.
Yeah, let's talk about cartage in and out. You probably don't have low back problems from trying to carry B3 organs and amp cabinets and stuff like that. But one of the nice things, of course, about those of us playing here in the 21st century is that we can carry stuff that sounds good and it's loud and it's lightweight. And I think that's a real blessing, don't you?
Absolutely.
So on these senior centers, let's say you've got a small group that's 30 or 40 people. You got an S1, you've got what, a guitar, what else do you carry?
Guitar, microphone, mic stand. I usually and I as I've gotten older, I can no longer stand for 2 or 3 hours and play. So I started looking for a chair on site, but I learned a long time ago that that wasn't always a good solution. So I purchased a wonderful folding wooden bar stool that's padded, and so it keeps me up high. It folds out and fits into. I have a cart that will uh, take basically most of the time one trip, if not two, and so I have the I have the S1 Pro, the chair, the microphone stand, the the guitar, and have a bag with mic and cables,
Yeah.
etc.
Okay. Okay. Let's go down that road for just a moment. What are you using mic wise?
The old standby SM58, sure, yeah.
You know, it's interesting. My wife, Angelica, we're both Chicago fans. And I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but almost every gig those guys are doing, they are on SM58s. And I think that's because that's what was available in 1968. They're comfortable with them. They know how they sound with a monitor, no matter what kind of room. And they're still using that mic 60 years later, which I think is a great testament, right?
Well, and a matter of fact, just the proof is in the pudding. The mic that I'm using here right now, I purchased this mic in 1979. It's not an SM58. I don't know what the model number is, but I kind of looked it up one time because I was curious. It was the predecessor to the SM58.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. That's amazing. And what kind of guitar are you using on these gigs?
So I have a Taylor 814 CE and Grand Auditorium, and I use light strings because I play light. I don't need anything really heavy and big, and uh, I've started, as you may know, Taylors come with elixir strings. They're
Yeah.
coated strings, and I just out of curiosity, I started using the D'Addario XS coated strings and love them. They seem, interestingly enough, they seem to last a long, long time before going out of tune.
My only issue that I ever had with elixirs, I think elixirs is a marvelous idea and it's a really good string. But
Hmm.
for me, when I'm playing electric guitar, and I've had some students that love elixir electric strings, because it was so slick, it was hard to grab the string and physically push up and down to bend or
Oh yeah, I bet.
vibrato.
Yeah,
The
depending.
other
Yeah.
issue that I had is that the strings wore out or were starting to wear. They still sounded good, but I could feel like divots on a golf course where the places had worn on the string. So but I completely get that. And of course, the 814 is a Cadillac guitar. That's a marvelous instrument. I think the other thing we should probably address is let's talk about backing tracks because that's kind of how indirectly you and I met.
Yeah, bet. Yeah, I tell you, I ran into when I started doing music again. It was because I ran into a fellow who was using backing tracks, and he played a little guitar with it, but most of the time not so much. And we were in a bar, and he was with a wireless microphone going up and down the bar, and I was singing harmony to what he was singing just for my own enjoyment. And he heard me, and he said, "Oh, gosh, you sound pretty good." And I said, "Ma, I used to play, and I'd like to play again." And but I'm not sure how I want to start. And he said, "Well, you're welcome to sit in with me anytime you want." He was very gracious.
Wow.
His name was Bill Stonehouse, and he was a very good singer, and introduced me to using backing track because I really had never really thought about that. As you probably know, so many purists kind of scoff at that, and I get that. But more and more, it's become more center stage these days. I mean, as you well know, I mean, for for decades, professional entertainers use backing tracks. We just didn't know it.
Sure, absolutely. I went to see Yes many times. I saw them at Duke in 1971 when they were promoting Fragile. A year later, they're doing Close to the Edge, and they have a track, a tape loop that runs all the way through the song Close to the Edge. The
Yeah.
same thing with The Who when they were out doing Who's Next. Keith Moon, you'll see pictures with some of those Koss Pro 4AA headphones that crushed everybody's skull. It was almost like the Steve Martin joke with the ear block on his head, right?
Yes.
But he was using that in order to play Won't Get Fooled Again. So
Yeah.
yeah, backing tracks have been going for those of us in the know since the early 1970s. It's not a
Mhm.
trick. I tell people now, if you go see Coldplay, I'm sorry, they're not making that sound with an upright piano, a guitar, bass, and a drum kit. It's just not happening.
Not happening. No.
What's interesting is, and I want to get your input about this, there's a lot of education that has to happen on the part of the buyer. People have to figure out it's okay to do that, number one. I think another thing that is important is to educate buyers about how much live entertainment costs. If you get somebody that you want to pay $50 or $100 for a 2 or 3 hour job, you're going to get somebody that might be worth $5 for the whole job. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, and to the point of backing tracks in particular, I love live entertainment as much as the next guy. But even when I'm out somewhere and there's someone playing the guitar and singing, and maybe they're pretty good, after about 4 or 5 songs, I'm about done because they can't. I mean, with what I do and what you do, I can do James Taylor, I can do Chicago, I can do Andrea Bocelli. I mean, there's just so much versatility with that. It's just incredible.
I think that's true. And I think, again, people are getting to a point where I think they really do want to hear more. And it's funny because we're familiar with Poor David's Pub. One of my students, or one of my guests, Steve had talked about that a while back. And I think that Sam was actually on Poor David's Pub once. Those are the places that, quote, frown on that, but they're not paying the sort of money that we would need to play to make it worth our while to be professional entertainers regularly anyway.
That's
Right?
right.
Most of those places, if you're playing original equipment, and Sam Baker made a point about telling me, he says, I'm a singer-songwriter myself. He says, I don't hire singer-songwriters for this gig because they're not able to do it. It's not what people want. People want to hear a full sound. And I have no problem with that personally. I actually take a lot of enjoyment, and I tell people I spend way too much time down the rabbit hole remixing stuff because I'm not using karaoke or made tracks. I will generally get a MIDI file and massage it to take care of it myself. But regardless, when you're standing out there, for me anyway,
Hmm.
there's a lot of comfort knowing when I'm playing and singing and I'm in the groove and I remember the words, right? And I'm tuned up, that it sounds incredible. Has that been your experience too?
Absolutely. Now, I must say I've taken the lazier route and used tracks primarily from karaoke version and whatnot, and maybe pulled out some instruments that I don't need or don't want. For example, I know at the time I looked at it, I was thinking about well doing my own tracks, but I'm here's this professional musician out here versus me that I could kind of play at it somewhat, and I took the shortcut. I have to admit I did, but interesting enough, when we're talking about talent, and if I could veer off for just a second, if you don't mind,
Please,
one
absolutely.
one of the things that so many entertainers that do what I do and probably what you do nowadays, they don't understand that it's much less about how good you are and much more about what value you bring to the venue. I have a lot of friends that they get upset because they can't get paid more or they can't get more gigs or whatever. I mean, being a business consultant, I can go in and talk to a restaurant owner and explain to him that, look, I know that I can bring in at least 10 or 12 people, maybe more, and I'll charge you X. So if 10 or 12 people come in and maybe more and they spend Y, then here's your return on investment, and it has very little to do. I mean, I certainly have to be able to perform to a certain level, but it has much less to do with that, much more to do because the restaurant. Why would a restaurant owner spend money to lose money? It makes no sense.
Absolutely. And I think that's interesting. I remember having this conversation with my friend Michael Edwin Q years ago. When I came to Dallas in 1996, he found out about me and started booking me right away. And he told people, he said, look, I'm not going to bring in 50 or 100 people to your restaurant. It's just not going to happen. Because he was playing Italian restaurants, right? And but he says what we'll do is he said that people will stay there a little bit longer. They may drink a little bit more. And the next
Yes.
time when they're debating, hey, we got five, six places. Let's go to that place. They had that guitar player. He was pretty good.
Hmm.
And so you end up building repeat business word of mouth. And it sounds like that's been what's the secret of your success from San Jose to Raleigh, right?
No, absolutely. You're absolutely correct, and it's how I've made some wonderful friends. I mean, certainly, and and you're right about that. One restaurant, one of the first restaurants I started playing here in Raleigh, had a separate restaurant and bar, and people would come in after dinner into the bar for an after dinner drink because there was live music in the restaurant, or and they'd have maybe a second drink because they enjoyed what was going on.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important also to reach people, whether you're physically pressing flesh between the gigs, shaking people's hands and kissing babies, as you joke, but anything like that, I think is really important. Let's talk about material and stuff. What's some of the, you mentioned just a few titles, but who are some of the artists that you currently perform material by?
It's a very broad variety. I've got close to 900 songs in my repertoire,
Wow.
and maybe another 75 that are in my duet repertoire, if you will. So there's plenty of material there. Um, I like to do what I call vintage pop music or vintage easy listening music, and probably the best example that I could offer that's available publicly is on Sirius XM as a channel called The Blend.
Yes.
And I mean, I listen to The Blend from time to time, and I think, gosh, I need to add that song. I need to add this song because I just grew up enjoying pop music. I mean, as I said earlier, I don't have much of an edge to my performance style. I'm not in heavy metal. I like easy listening music, and I like music that's pretty and fun to sing, and particularly that when it lends itself to a harmony with a duo. So, but I certainly took a lead like many, or like some entertainers, I guess you could, well, over the past 10 years, doing a lot of Michael Bublé stuff because that crosses so many lines, and some of his originals and some of his redos. Um, I'll do certainly some of the popular songs like from Eagles and from James Taylor, Billy Joel, Neil Diamond. Uh, uh, I'm sure there's plenty more that would come to more mind if I pulled up my list. But the fact of the matter is the variety is the key in my mind.
I think that's absolutely true. I do a real wide variety of music in my show. I do smooth jazz, I do pop stuff, I certainly do rock and country stuff, and a blues tune or two here, etc. But I think it's important to constantly mix things up. I've jokingly told my wife and my kids over the years, when you least expect it, and I enjoy doing that. I might do a ZZ Top song and then play Nat Cole's Unforgettable, or
Yeah.
maybe Fly Me to the Moon by Sinatra, and that's a lot of fun to pivot like that to be able to offer an audience a lot more. I have to tell you, 900 songs, wow, that's impressive, Bill.
Well, it was, it's particularly being retired for the past 4 years. Obviously, I have my daytimes available, so that's one of the things I do to keep myself busy. Um, I figured I have a couple of years left in me, perhaps. I'd like to, it's just a personal goal. I'd like to hit 1,000 songs as a personal goal. I don't know if I'll ever do it because now it comes fewer and further between that I find songs that I really want to adapt to what I do. But I mean, you're right about the style. The styles are different too because the venues are different. I mean, if I'm playing in a restaurant, not in a lounge, but in a restaurant, I'm in the background, and I'm not going to be doing Chicago, and very few Eagles tunes, for example. So one of the things I have found kind of a fun tangent is to find kind of Latin arrangements of popular songs, and that really helps
Yeah.
out quite a bit.
It's funny that you even mentioned that because I think I must be having a dream about this or something this morning because I have some material like that. I've done the Slash tune Obsession Confession for 20 years, and it's a great piece. and it's very Latin sounding. Otmar Lieber, obviously, something like Barcelona Nights. Every time I play that, people go crazy.
Hmm.
And it's just a really good song. And so I think anything Latin tinged like that, I think that's become a lot more interesting, a lot more exciting. People seem to enjoy that. Um, and I think that it's really interesting that you mentioned about not being edgy, because I got to be honest, I'm not terribly edgy myself. I do some ZZ Top, I do some Leonard Skinner, I do a Boston tune, a Journey tune, and stuff like that. But um, I think over a period of time, you find out what works for you and your voice and what doesn't.
Hmm.
And it's smart to do that, right?
Absolutely, you bet. I mean, some people will make a request and they'll ask me for a certain song or a certain artist, and I say, "Gosh, I'd love to do that, but I know what I can do and what I can't do, and I try to stay within that realm."
A man's got to know his limitations.
Absolutely.
Right, right. Good,
Yep.
good, good. Cool. So a couple of final questions. First of all, what's the best part of this? And I think we probably already touched on this a little bit, but I want to hear it directly from you.
Yeah, it is absolutely the people. I mean, certainly the people that come into your life. I've got a buddy of mine now that he goes to almost every gig that I do, and not only does he help me carry my gear in, he knows how to hook everything up. And I try to give him money. He won't take any money, so I always pick up his tab at the end of the night or buy him dinner or whatever. But other people too. Before I started playing as regularly as I do on some of the public venues, I wasn't playing out enough for some of my people that like what I do. So I said, okay, I'll make you a deal once a month. If one of you hosts a party and make it BYOB and maybe you offer heavy appetizers, I'll provide the music at no charge as my way of giving back. And
Wow.
that's it's grown from about 5 people to over 50 people now. They don't always come to every one, but they're on the mailing list.
Wow. So you do have a mailing list. That's interesting.
Yes, I do. I send out my schedule on Mondays, and I keep it kind of short and sweet. Just time and temperature, and a logo to accompany the venue, and at the bottom, thank everybody for their continued support.
Wow. That's really interesting. It sounds like you really have used what the Marriott company taught you to kind of take what you've done and just continue to grow the business, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it really is as you know, I'm sure, it's just as much about business as it is about music. And if you can put those two things together, I have a lot of friends that would like more gigs, that they don't get enough gigs, and they don't understand why. And I try to tell them what I do, and they don't want to go through the whole process, so they don't get as many gigs.
It really is a process. It's funny you mentioned that. Tommy Tedesco, who I had the privilege of studying with a little bit when I was at Guitar Institute, one time says, there's music and there's a music business. He said, don't confuse the two.
That's a fact. That is a true fact.
We're fortunate to be able to get to do what we do. Final question, Bill.
Okay.
Somebody wants to do what you do or what I do, and they're coming at it maybe from a band background, or maybe they've just played in their bedroom and sung for years. What would you where would you point them in what direction?
Well, I mean, a great starting point is the Facebook group that you and I belong to. I mean,
Which is facebook.com backing tracks is all that it is.
it's really just a wonderful source of information. I mean, there's certainly varied opinions, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, some people like karaoke versions, some people like jam zone, some people do MIDI files and stems, and some people don't. And that's all of that's okay. It's just different ways to approach the business. I mean, like for myself, I probably could learn how to do MIDI files and work with different stems or make my own. But I chose my effort in different directions. So using karaoke version or something like that is just more straightforward for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, joining a backing tracks group, and would you suggest maybe starting off with a restaurant?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. That whole Italian restaurant idea is the best place to go because it's performer friendly, it's user friendly, it's usually much more forgiving if you're learning your craft, if you will. And it's once you get in there and find out how much fun it is, then it encourages you to kind of build on what you do, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Bill, finally, your webpage is?
BillBarney.com.
Wonderful. We'll be sure and link this here in the description. This has been, again, just a ton of information. And as my former student and solo performer down in South Texas, David Fortune says, take notes on this one, right? There's a ton of stuff. So I'm going to encourage everybody to go back and get out a pencil and a piece of paper, take a lot of notes, because Bill has given all of us, including yours truly, a ton of actionable advice. And I thank you for that, my friend. This
Well,
is
thank you for having me, Ronnie. Been a real
wonderful,
pleasure.
wonderful. You've been listening to the Band of One podcast, and that's all for this episode. If you have ideas for upcoming podcasts, please reach out to me through our Facebook page, facebook.com/Band of One podcast. You can email me through my webpage. It's guitarmadesimpler.com, Riley@guitarmadesimpler.com. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.
Guitar Made Simpler, an intelligent approach, is the first all-new guitar method in years. Riley Wilson, veteran guitar teacher, writer, and performer, has taught this same material successfully to thousands of students since 1987. This logical approach will help anyone begin mastering the world's most popular instrument. A combination of formal notation with guitar tablature and included MP3 disc guarantee your success. Online video by the author demonstrating performing examples slowly and correctly. Start making real progress on the guitar. Order your copy today at guitarmadesimpler.com.